Hello and welcome to the Where's My Thing podcast, where we help you find your thing,
as well as help us find our thing,
in this exciting world. So in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling, how that relates to business, and just, expand on that topic a little bit. So let's get going. So yeah, storytelling. It's a little bit of a weird one because when I first heard of it in the context of business, it's like, well, I don't want to know about Little Red Riding Hood. I want to know how to make a bit of moolah. And so it's I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one. But actually, the more me and Rob delved into this, we actually realised how important it actually was. And so we want to talk about the different chapters, I suppose, in the story and the different elements that build it up around a business and how that actually affects the customer as well as the business itself. But before we get stuck into that, hello, my name's Matt Esley. I run a YouTube channel based on woodworking and various other things, and with me I have
Rob Harvey, who is the video producer for Matt Runs a Podcast and creates music books on the side. So, before we get stuck into anything, we are going to do a quick 60-second update to hold ourselves accountable to what we've actually done the past week, something we do in every episode. One thing that's worth mentioning, actually, this is the second time we've recorded this podcast because the first time I forgot to record a bit, or it just stopped doing it halfway through. There's no excuses. You ruined everything.
Yeah. So if this seems somewhat artificial, it's because this is the second time.
Yes. So I believe you're... Wait, who goes first on this one?
I went first in the original time we recorded this, but seeing as now the second time, you can go first.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, fine. Thank you so much. Right, we're timing ourselves this time around. Here is my 60-second update starting now. So I worked on the Where's My Thing podcast website. I bought up the branding for that to make it all nice and shiny across the board. I made it so that it matched across YouTube and Spotify too. The podcast videos now exist on YouTube. I believe every single one should be on there by the time this releases, which should be awesome. I created a financial report, which is on the Where's My Thing podcast website as well. Finally finished editing the Babinga Boys. I planned an entire music book the other day. I've got 15 pieces already ready to go. I wrote 4 pieces yesterday, just got them all written out, which was lovely, and I've scripted 2 videos of about 11 that I've got planned going. So sort of loads of little bits and bobs happening there. And I've also made the website available to be found on Google so we can get all the sort of views from that as well. Fingers crossed. I've got 6 seconds to go, so I'm just going to have a little bit of a chat with myself and biscuits.
Nice.
Oh, jeez, it's loud.
Oh, feedback. That felt very controlled. You've got scarily good at this. I don't like that. It's like you've just come out of meditation or something like that.
Well, it was the second time I got to say all of it, but I'm glad that I've done a few extra things on this second recording.
Yeah, that hit a few more points than what I've got going here. But we were just saying before this, what I tend to do is I write down loads of points, but then feel the need to elaborate on lots of them, therefore only get through about 3 of them. So I've got 3 primary ones here, and then I've got some emergency ones just in case I don't know what to do. So 1 minute starting from this is what I've done in the past week. Now, so in the past week, Robert, I have started filming the Toolbox project for the 3rd project of the free online woodworking school. I've been sizing material, I've been machining it down, and I'm sort of halfway through that stage at the moment. I've also been working a little bit on the toolboxes I've been building on the side, just because I want to have a batch of like 5 or 6 to sell at the end of them. Apart from that, I've also been doing a little bit of remote teaching at Rykerwood, which has been quite challenging, but also quite rewarding. I've been teaching students technical drawing and things, and I've also been had a lot of my minds taken up with the fact that of all times of the year, City and Guilds have chosen to hold an inspection on on the course, which is great, so it's very nice of them. Anyway, apart from that, we've also been working a little bit on the knives and the whole supply situation of that. I've been working with someone very knowledgeable on that, so you'll be hearing a little bit more about that over the coming months. And I also wrote a financial support biscuits.
Sorry, a financial support biscuits?
No, report. Did I say support?
You said you said support.
I mean,
that was good though. That was good.
Yeah, if you have a look at it, you'll see the expenses and you'll think, oh, maybe he does need financial support.
I'll be honest, I skimmed through it just before this podcast started, and that jumped out at me, and I couldn't believe how high they were.
Yeah, it's quite a bit, isn't it?
That is bonkers.
I call it reinvestment. Others call it a problem.
Yes, yeah, or gambling. So let's get into this. Let's get into the main topic here. It's storytelling in a business. So when did we realise that this was important?
Okay. I'm glad you spun it this way, because I think I asked you last time and I put you on the spot about it.
Yeah, no, we've twisted it, everything.
So this occurred to us, or this whole concept occurred to us throughout the initial lockdown in 2020, sometime in like April or something like that. Rob read a book called Building a Story Brand, which is what we're going to be building a lot of this podcast around and reflecting on, and he recommended me read it. At the time, I was reading a book, another one on branding called Primal Branding, which actually shared a few parallels to this book that Rob was reading, but he loved it so much, he recommended it to me, and we actually put it into practice for the first time when I did the garden workshop series throughout the last summer. You'll notice in the first video of it, where I'm sort of talking about the overall premise of the series and the meaning behind it, there's a very strong meaning there, which is something that the channel lacked previously. Because, without sort of expanding on it too much, previously we would just jump into projects saying, we're doing this because, we just are. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, we actually realised the importance of building a story around it, and as a result, we got a lot more buy-in from the audience, and we have, we're converts now. We like it. It's awesome.
Oh, massively, massively. And apart from anything else, again, without getting into the nitty-gritty too much yet, it's the fact that there's now a structure, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of whether it's a video or business, to be honest, there's this fundamental structure that you can follow in the first place, and it makes it so much easier for creating greater content.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you just sort of tick off the boxes as you go. Yeah, it's much easier, much easier. We did have a few problems at the start, though, because the way that this business, the YouTube one, is very untraditional. So the book is aimed primarily at traditional businesses where you have customers and things like that. And of course, there are elements of my business that have customers, but then there's other elements that are more educational, and I'm sort of like the product giver. I don't really know. It was quite confusing, and so it took us a long time to get over this certain hurdle, which we'll expand on. Should we just get into it now?
Yeah, let's get onto it now. Yeah, let's go.
Cool. All right. So to start with a basic story, you need a character. Yes. Or otherwise known as a hero, which I think is what they refer to in this book. So this was actually the stumbling block that Rob and I came up with, because what a lot of businesses do is they pitch themselves as the hero. So it's like, I've done all of this, I've achieved all this throughout my life, we do this, we do this, and they're basically painting themselves as the hero in order to make the customer buy from them, kind of thing. As opposed to making the customer the hero and asking them the questions that need to be asked, and being the without putting too many spoilers in there, being the guide to the customer's journey throughout their business. So it's a slight switch of places, but that's in the context of traditional businesses. In my one, or in this one, it's hard to take a viewer through that journey if they're the hero, because they're at home watching a video. It kind of needs to be me going through that journey, and it just became this whole thing that was very difficult. But I'll let you expand on it a bit.
Yeah, the interesting thing there is for video formats, you can be all of it. So you can be the hero, you can be the villain, you can be the guide against yourself. It's this weird sort of just fight against yourself to become this entertainment. I guess if you were to be watching a movie, you would see the guide, you'd see the hero, you'd see the villain on the screen. So it's really the same thing for YouTube as well. But if we bring this back a little bit to the whole business concept, we're saying, right, don't position yourself as the hero, position yourself as the guide, based off this story branding book. And it makes absolute sense, because most people aren't looking for a company that's just bragging about themselves. They're not looking for somebody who's just tooting their own horn. You're looking for someone who's actually going to walk you through step by step how to fix your problem. And whether that's a service or a product, it's irrelevant. You still want that thing to be a guide rather than a hero.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you're building this, or when you're building this relationship with the customer in a position to be their guide, you need to be able to identify the problems that they are having as the hero. Because at the end of the day, if there's no problems, then there's no story. It's just watching a hero skip through fields picking flowers, which, I mean, it might be quite nice for some people, but in terms of an exciting, gripping story, there's not really anything there. And so next we move on to the problems that the hero is having, and this comes in a few different forms. Firstly, you've got what's referred to as the villain, so the sort of main overarching problem, and then the villain puts out these certain barriers that also sort of attack the customer's mental mind. It sort of plays mind games with them, I suppose, sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so these things are internal beliefs, external beliefs or external barriers, and philosophical barriers as well. So you've got the villain and then these three things that the villain is putting out. So internal problems would be something like a customer not thinking they're good enough to do something. They're feeling frustrated, or they're not feeling confident, or something like that. It's an internal thing in your mind that's stopping you from taking action on this thing. You've then got external, which is more of a physical barrier. Perhaps the customer is feeling confident in themselves, but they don't know how to work out this problem or how to use this thing in order to actually make it work. And then you've got philosophical things where, apart from all of that, it's like the customer has this, or the hero, should I say, has this general feeling that they deserve to be able to solve this problem.
Yeah, so the philosophical side of that is really taking sort of a much deeper dive into human psyche. We're not talking about your day-to-day problems that you're just thinking about. It's more these raw things that have evolved literally through thousands of years. So that can be reputation, that can be monetary standing. It's all these like baseline perspectives that a customer will have in the background regardless of what they're buying. And so you've got the internal, you've got the external, but you've also got these fundamental issues that you can highlight, or at least the villain is highlighting, so that the brand can portray themselves more as a guide to fix all of those solutions.
Mm-hmm.
No,
yeah, I mean,
problems. They're not solutions, they're problems.
If I was to put this, so it was funny because when I read this book and I got an understanding of all these different concepts and how there's internal, external and philosophical beliefs that stop you from taking action on things, I was able to read into marketing copy very easily. Like there's some things, particularly on those websites where they have like videos with big red words pop up on screen, they know exactly what they're targeting, and it is those three things, and it's why people buy into them so much. So I was going to buy some software, or I was interested in some software to do with email marketing over summer, and after reading this book I watched a video on it, or a seminar, and he hit 3 points in it, all of which ticked off those three things. So the first one was he was ticking off the internal thing, and he was saying for this software, it's basically building a big business and earning lots of money from it. The first belief you may have is that in order to be successful in this, you need to be interesting. And if you're not feeling interesting, here is a bunch of people who felt the same thing previously, and look at the success they had. Obviously, it was elaborated on that a little bit, but that was an internal barrier knocked down. The next barrier was the external one, which he addressed, and that was to do with, okay, you might be a complete technophobe and you have no idea how to work programs like this. So what we're going to do is we are going to include this free instruction guide and also one-to-one mentoring in the first month after you buy the product. Boom, external barrier knocked down. The customer now feels confident in themselves, internal. They now feel confident that they can actually use the product, external. And then the thing at the end was, it was just saying, everyone deserves to make a living doing something they love. No one deserves to be in a job 40 hours a week or even more doing something they absolutely hate. And he sort of built on that a bit, philosophical belief knocked down. And all of a sudden, I was looking at it thinking, damn, I'm really bought into this. This sounds incredible. And then I thought about it. I was like, wait, hang on a second. I know what he's done here to me.
You got caught in the trap.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really incredible seminar, very good. And I probably would have ended up buying it if I didn't look into the marketing copy so much, because I knew what he was doing. But it's a great product. Like, don't get me wrong, people could use it for bad things, people could use it for good things, but that, at the end of the day, the techniques exist. That's down to the person who's selling it.
Yeah, that's it. It's not like we're immediately categorizing anyone who immediately starts their seminar hitting these points as bad people with bad products, and they're just trying to grab your money. Obviously, that could happen, but it's more along the lines of, this is why they're telling you these things. They want to get your interest now. Just right out in there at the onset, they want to grab your attention so that whatever they say afterwards, they've already got you hooked regardless.
Yeah.
So this can apply to small businesses or large businesses. It's irrelevant whether it's spoken word or whether it's text. You can find a way to get people invested so long as you're calling to their basic problems. You're highlighting what they're struggling with, and you're telling them, I have a solution.
Yeah, and it's really worth mentioning that these are actual problems that people have. Like, it's not like they're pulling them out of thin air and saying, you have this problem. It's like, a lot of people feel frustrated at work. This person has a solution to it that has worked for loads of people. There's nothing wrong in saying that. It might seem a little bit weird how they're doing it psychologically, but at the end of the day, the problem is still there for a lot of people. And if people resonate with that and they take action on it, brilliant. They have done them a service using, psychological means to do it. But hey, it worked, so...
Yeah, and I think the ends justify the means. So long as anyone who's using this has something that is worthwhile, then you want your voice heard. So why not use it?
Yeah, I find this part the most interesting out of all of them, because, I don't know, I when I heard about these 3 barriers, I was blown away by, literally, if you knock down those 3 things, there is nothing else that you could possibly be reserved about. And if you have, then they probably haven't hit those points very well. The only one I guess I would like to add, which again was in that email one, which isn't in the book, is what's referred to as the vehicle. So you could have all those barriers knocked down, but then not have trust in the product itself, because you could easily get all these barriers knocked down. You feel confident in yourself, you feel confident in being able to use software, you feel confident in the philosophical means, and then you're like, cool, thanks for that, I'm going to go to these guys. And so that is just one more thing that needs to be built into it. You need to sort of have a USP, I suppose, a unique selling point. That's referred to as the vehicle in this thing. You need to have confidence in that vehicle and not this one. So a unique selling point is obviously also important.
Yeah, you're essentially saying that the product has to be good enough for these things to actually bear any weight in the first place. And again, that can be a literal thing or a service. It brings me just very slightly on a tangent, because you've been watching a lot of Dragon's Den. You've broken your back while watching it. Have you seen the episode? Have you seen the episode where there's a guy who's trying to get the dragons invest in a cap for the end of a cucumber?
Yes. Yeah, and he gets hired by Peter Jones at the end.
Does he actually get hired?
Yeah. Yeah,
I must...
He didn't get invested for the product because it was awful, but Peter Jones really liked how he came across as a presenter, and he was like, we're not going to go for this, but call me afterwards. I have a perfect position for it. I don't know if he actually went for it in the end, but he was offered it in the den there and then.
That sounds awesome. So yeah, that's one of those moments where you can have all of these solutions, you can solve their internal, their external, their philosophical problems, but if the vehicle at the end of the day is utter rubbish and people don't need it, then you're still not going to persuade them.
Yeah. That was a great episode, that one. I'm glad you brought Dragon's Den into this, because I didn't talk about my broken back this morning.
There we go. We've got it in there. I just wanted people to be aware of how damaged you are purely from watching TV shows.
All right. So that pretty much covers all of the problems that the hero is having. And so what you need next, and me and Rob have already alluded to this, is a guide. So a guide needs to be able to identify these problems that the hero, the customer, is having, and they need to create a solution to push them forward to battle to fight through those barriers. If you think of this in the form of an actual story, we've got this noted down here, is the Hunger Games. So instantly, if you haven't watched this, we'll explain it. You've got Katniss being the main hero. She's got various problems, such as internal beliefs that she's not actually that strong of a person, if I'm right in that. External problems in that the city is bearing down on them and taking all their money and they're living in poverty. And then the philosophical ones saying, why should we be living like this? Boom, three problems like that, among various other ones. There's a bit of love and all that in there, but there's all these things. And then the city ends up calling her forward to do something like that, and she needs a guide in order to survive it, essentially, which is where Hamish steps in, the guide. Hamish, being in the context of business, is the business, so a guide. And you'll notice how throughout the entire thing, he does not brag about himself. He is in no position to be a hero whatsoever, but he knows how to help the hero through the story. And so that's the important thing. Like, if it was just Hamish there bragging about it, and like it wouldn't work too well. No.
And like the fact that he's not doing the bragging just alludes to the fact that actually he knows what he's talking about, because sometimes bragging does the opposite thing, where people just think, oh, well, yeah, you're sort of compensating for something here. Whereas when you don't do the bragging and you just literally show them through doing, as a business, you're literally just proving that your products work or your services work, then you're going to end up in a position where you can help people and they're going to come to you because you look helpful. And sometimes that's all anybody ever wants.
Yeah. Wasn't there something to do with, I think in the story he does allude to something where he has had experience with it in the past or something like that. Basically, it's a way of resonating with the hero and like feeling relatable. I think there was something in that, and so that is obviously important as well. You do need to be relatable, kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. And including stuff like testimonials, reviews, all of those sort of things to show that other people have had your guiding hand throughout the process is just going to help establish this belief, establish this emotional connection, which you wouldn't otherwise have had just tooting your own horn, saying how good we are, how good the product is. Yeah. So that's the guide. And if you're a business owner, that is the position you want to find yourself in. You need to feel in a position of authority, but also quiet confidence, I suppose, and identify problems that the hero is having and start knocking down those barriers one by one, and be realistic about those problems as well. Don't just pull them out of thin air because then you're addressing to no one. You need to actually be thinking, right, what is my customer struggling with internally? Most of the time that's frustration, at least for the case of physical products. It's they can't solve this initial barrier and it's causing them time, effort, money, frustration, whatever. And you just knock down these barriers one by one, but be realistic about them. Don't pull them out of thin air. So once you've established yourself as the guide, that's where you need to move on to creating some sort of plan to help the hero through the process. And it's often worth putting this plan in front of them so they know exactly what they're going to do from the get-go, rather than just sort of pull them along as we go. And if they don't have anything concrete in front of them, then the customer is not going to feel confident in taking that journey with you. So I think I said this in the last podcast that I actually quite liked, is when you're purchasing, again, if we use software, if you go on a website, often there's 3 tiers that you can purchase from. You've got the bronze tier, which has certain things. You've then got the silver tier, which is all those things plus all this. And then you've got the gold tier, all these things plus that. And that's essentially them putting a plan in front of your face and giving you confidence that, wow, I get all of this if I go with these guys. Previously, they've identified all these problems. Like, this is great. I can actually pick my own route in all of this. And again, they're not bragging, or at least they shouldn't be bragging about all these things. They should be addressing it in a certain language that makes the customer think this is for me, not for them.
Yeah, and it's that customization which gets that customer involved on an emotional level. They suddenly realise that there's more to it than just this face level product or this face level service. There's things that can actually match to their specific needs. And while this might be a little bit of a struggle to do for smaller businesses, to try and make sure that you're sort of catering to as many people as possible, remember that it's still a restricted number of plans that you need. We're only talking like 3 to 5 different routes for somebody to take, whether that's, I don't know, if it was a service, you're looking at a subscription plan that has multiple different tiers, but if it's a product, you are having 3 or 5 different variations, possibly, that people are then going to have a little bit more choice over. Don't go down the line of just, variety must be good. Let me make sure that everything is available all of the time. And I think Matt used this on me the other day. What did you call it? The paradox of choice.
Yeah.
When there's so much choice, no one actually chooses anything.
Yeah. Sorry, not is it paradox or paralysis of choice? Where you feel
Let's
paralyzed.
Go paralysis. That sounds correct.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it's like, I think the first analogy I heard of it is, because it was really relatable, is when you go to a Christmas market and there's a cheese stall and there's like 50 cheeses and you're like, I've only got 3 samples, I don't know what to go for, and you're just a bit lost. Whereas if you go there and there's just 5, it's like, these must be good. These must be good. And usually when you try them, they are good. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see, what I would do is, no matter what, walk past it, because it's a cheese stand and cheese is disgusting. It's just mouldy milk. But yeah, moving on from that, like, let's take a real world example. Let's take both a physical product and let's talk about YouTube videos and go from 2 different directions with the same physical, external, internal problem sort of scenario. Yep. So let's start with the physical thing, the marking knives. You've been making marking knives for the last, year or so now?
Yeah, about 1.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, 1.5 years. And you've had the rather convenient circumstance where you've actually had a lot of eyeballs already looking at the product.
Yes.
So you didn't have to deal with this internal, external thing going on. You didn't really have to do the marketing.
No.
But let's say you did. Let's walk through the steps of this internal, external, philosophical process to position yourself as the person that I want to go to buy my marking knife as opposed to a scalpel.
Sure thing. All right then. So internal beliefs, I think, are pretty obvious with woodworkers a lot of the time. A lot of people just think they are... You alluded to this in one of the past episodes when it was about people practicing in order to generate a skill over time. I can't remember what book it was, but a lot of people have this internal belief that they just aren't built for fine woodworking, or they just don't have this attention to detail. And so I would probably address that somehow. Thinking of the language now, I can't think of how I would do it, but that's probably what I would address. It would be people's internal frustrations that they can't seem to be able to get to this next level of things. And I would obviously position the knife in order to be a solution to that. The external thing is, again, this is a physical barrier. So this is one that is actually something that I do use in my copy just because it's the reason I personally like the knife. And it's purely to get into thin gaps and things like that, to be agile, to be versatile. People's external problems before would be, this knife's too thick and bulky, and like if I drop it, I've got to resharpen it, and like there's all these things that come into it that make it an absolute nightmare to use. Whereas my one, it's like, it's thin but rigid, so you can get into thin gaps. It's if you drop it on the floor and it shatters, you just replace it with a new blade. Like, it's just breaking down all these external problems that people have been facing so far. And then the philosophical one, that would be difficult to pull out. It would probably still be built on people deserve to be able to make things with their hands and enjoy the process. And in fact, actually, linking back to the Amazon Basics video, people should get fulfillment, or people should feel fulfillment when they make a purchase from a small business owner. I'd have to be careful with that, because that would be putting me in the hero's position, sort of like, you celebrate me because I'm this amazing product creator. I'd have to be careful on that, but that's something that I'm personally passionate about, and I would probably try and do it around that somehow. You then, again, that fourth one that I sort of mentioned, you've then got the vehicle. So for me, I've got, at the end of the day, my scalpel or my knife is just a scalpel with a nice handle on it. You can get one from Stanley, which is 10 quid with exactly the same blade, and it'll give you the same thing. So people could take all that from me and think, wow, that blade's awesome. I'm going to buy this Stanley one. And so, again, I'm not entirely sure how I would do it at this point, but if I put some thought into it, I would need to try and work out why mine is unique from Stanley, apart from just being visual, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the aesthetics hold a lot of weight to begin with. There's a satisfaction that people are going to take from using a custom marking knife over something that's mass produced. But on top of that, already before you've even got to sort of thinking about the vehicle, hopefully if somebody's been reading through that copy, and copy is just marketing text if you didn't know what we meant when we kept saying copy. Once people have read through that, hopefully there's just a little bit more of an emotional connection to make people think, this knife has value, regardless of what it's made of, regardless of how it looks, because it's got this feeling in the background. The person who created this has put me in mind when creating this, then suddenly it's a little bit more of a worthwhile purchase over just going out and buying a scalpel blade that in reality you're not going to care about. You're going to drop it, you're going to lose it, you're going to go buy another one, and it's not going to have that same emotional connection.
Yeah.
Which is what the copy's hopefully trying to generate over time.
And this is where the line's kind of blurred as well a little bit between the customer being the hero and me being the hero with the sort of business that we run. Because if it was just a traditional business, what I would do is sell that knife and I would get testimonials from successful clients and things like that, and obviously, highlight the successes that people are having. But then also in the videos where I'm the sort of character hero going through this story, I need to then be the poster boy for that knife and promote it in use. So it works in favor. Like it works really well, to be honest, in terms of marketing, and it's part of the reason why I'm in the position I am now, where the demand is so high. We just got to sort out the supply side of things. It's because for ages I've just been putting time into essentially unintentionally marketing these things to the point where as soon as they're available, people are just bought into that character and the successes they're having with that product. Yeah, exactly, without a doubt. So you mentioned the whole concept of these being shown in videos and how sort of the videos have built this over time. But if we were to take, let's say, a series of videos that you worked on to begin with, I don't know whether you want to go for the garden workshop series or the picnic bench, and let's break down the whole internal, external, philosophical side of that, considering that it is a completely different perspective where you have to be both the hero, the guide, and potentially the villain at times. Yeah, well, I guess the mind is the villain in that one, is how we sort of positioned it. Well, actually, no, not necessarily the mind. It was a few different things. It was probably the circumstances, to be honest, and then that caused the mind's internal problems. That would have been it. So which one do you want to highlight? So if we start from the top with the garden workshop, and again, you can go back and watch this, and literally, because we weren't very good at it at this point, you'll see me actually label these things like guide and plan and think like throughout it, because I didn't know at that point how to build it into everyday language. So it'd be quite interesting if you go back and watch it. But essentially, in the case of the garden workshop, let's paint a picture here. I was unable to get access to my workshop because it was the initial coronavirus lockdown, and I needed to set up a workshop in my garden in order to carry on the woodworking side of things. Now, if I hadn't have read this book, Building a Story Brand, that would have been it with with the story. It's just I can't get access to my workshop, so I'm going to move it home and do it here instead. Come with me.
I'm compelled. I'm ready to watch.
Yeah, and it's like people would like that. It's a garden workshop, it's relatable to people, there's something there, but there isn't much depth to it and much buy-in at all, which is why we wanted to build this story around it. And again, what's really important here is we're not fabricating this story out of thin air. The internal and external problems that I highlighted in it in order to build this story were there. They do exist. It's just previously I would have thought, that's unimportant, they don't care about that, let's just move on with it. So from the top, there's me in a garden workshop, internal problems. At the time, I was struggling with motivation and struggling to challenge myself in the workshop. I was struggling to pull myself through through projects, and I was just feeling frustrated. Again, frustrated, sort of the easy one to go through, because I just wasn't able to get into things as much as I wanted. Internal problem identified, I say that in the video. External one, very obvious, coronavirus. I can't get to my workshop, so I need to move it here. So that's one we would have addressed. Philosophical problem was, I felt in a position where I had lots of eyes watching me, and I could have, I wanted to capitalise on that somehow and do something to give back to the charity, I suppose. And so I decided to base the entire series around building boxes to give to 3 NHS staff. I was hoping it would be more, but I only managed to make 3 boxes in the time. But that was the philosophical thing. It's like, I've got all these problems, but I want to address those while also doing something good. 3 barriers instantly knocked down. So then I basically used the series and the viewers to be the guide throughout that, so they could steer the project, they could suggest things as I go, and I was basically just pitching it as, you guys help me through this and watch me knock down all these barriers. And it set off a really, really strong start to the series. I think you'll agree with that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, I watched that first video. Now, bearing in mind, I had no hand in filming or editing. Like, we'd had a bit of back and forth in regards to how we were going to build this whole story brand concept into it. And I hadn't seen the video, and then it got released. And I honestly couldn't believe how compelled I was to keep on watching. Like, the style of the editing had changed to keep things moving along. But every word that you said was relatable. Every word got me drawn into the whole concept of just watching, and I was just absorbing everything you were saying. Now, I admit I didn't watch the rest of the series. It clearly didn't do that great a job. But no, genuinely, that first episode absolutely blew me away and really highlighted how this story just changes everything. And like you said, you're not describing things, and you're not saying things that didn't already exist in the first place. You're just vocalizing them. And that's what's been missing before in previous videos, and that's what's been missing in a lot of businesses and the way that sort of stuff happens. You just got to vocalize people's issues or your own issues, and then provide a solution to it.
So yeah, what was interesting about what Rob just said is the fact that he lost interest after one video, which, out the sort of context of the story side of things, it's more to do with our video structure or problems with that, because it's very easy to paint this very strong story and address all these things at the start, but then maintaining that story over, I think the Garden Workshop was like 13 parts in the end, maintaining it throughout all that, and then trying to wrap it up at the end. It's difficult to try and go over all those points and keep them sort of high in people's mind, while also doing the actual subject in mind, which is why I sort of credit people in movies so well, because they can just do that all and sustain that attention over a long time. We also then tried it in the Japanese picnic bench series, where we addressed all these problems at the start. Again, they did exist, we just highlighted them. But again, we felt that same problem of the story deteriorating over time, and it was difficult to stay motivated and keep it at the top of people's minds. And so that's actually where we are now, where we're actually cutting down on the overall quantity of videos in favour for this quality, because if we can get an entire video or an entire project condensed into one with a very strong story over it, it's going to make much more of an impact. So previous examples of that were the 2 we did, we're living in the workshop, and also the Amazon Basics plane. Admittedly, with those, we didn't necessarily highlight the certain points we've said so far, like the villain and the internal and the external problems and all that. However, if you thought about it, I reckon you could probably pick those out, because there was a great story around both of those, and if there's a great story, then chances are those elements are probably in there somewhere. We just didn't intentionally address them.
Exactly. Yeah, the story that developed, the whole concept of pushing a story into the videos, really just put the channel on a different level. And it's not like it's taken a huge amount of time to do this either. It's just we've read the story brand book, and we'll have a link in the description to all of the all of the books we've read recently. In fact, I mean, if you're listening to this, go to the Where's My Thing podcast website and I'll make sure there's a link there. But it's the interaction and the community that you've now developed because people are invested in these stories that make it so worthwhile. Now, because they're also compressed, they're becoming shareable. They're the sort of things that more people can actually pass on because it's like, yeah, watch this first video of 50 parts. Yeah, you'll really get stuck in, you will. Or it's like, watch this video, it's only 15 minutes of your time, you're going to love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just a whole different way of doing things. Now, this is from a video perspective. This is if you're trying to do this from a YouTube or production side of things, each video that you create should probably have its own story revolving around it, unless it's a tutorial or a review. If you're trying to tell a story, make it a story. But if it's not that, don't try and force it in there. But if it's a business side of things, you don't need to worry so much about this continuous flow. All you need to do is get that initial impression and then make your product speak for itself afterwards. Mm-hmm. It's less required to have this story develop over time, continuously. I mean, you can have a mailing list and maybe that's how you sort of get people involved and you can keep describing things over time. But otherwise, it's really about that first purchase and then you've built up that relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas the videos, it's a recurring format.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, actually, I know we might run slightly over here, but there was a video or a channel I've been watching a lot recently. You've probably heard of them, Airac on YouTube. Yeah, so he's got he built up 1 million subscribers in 1 year. And actually what's interesting about this is he's very good at storytelling, but actually each individual video has a story in it. However, his channel has this massive overarching story as well, where it's at this time last year or in December 2019, he was feeling sort of lost and frustrated, didn't know what to do with his life. He just really wanted to be a YouTuber. And throughout, he set himself his goal at the start and he wanted to have 1 million subscribers by the next year. And so in each video, it's obviously got this main story that starts and resolves by the end, but there's also just this little element in the middle where he either addresses it directly or you just know it's there, where he's doing this to feel good about himself and build up these numbers on the side. And so that is the method I could see us eventually. I mean, it's a lot to think about, but again, these stories are there. We just need the time to actually pull them out and work out how to actually address them and keep them top of mind. For me, that is kind of there with the business at the moment. Like, I started this because I wasn't in a good place or anything like that, and I just wanted something to feel relevant and good about myself. And I've addressed this in previous videos, but I could highlight that more in order to inspire more people and have that as the overarching channel thing, as like a sense of or a search for meaning, and then just these individual videos in it have these little stories to kind of keep that ongoing. Big things.
Yeah, I really like that idea of an overarching story, and I guess in a business that's their mission statement, whether their larger look at life, what they want to do with the business. Normally it's something to do with something ecological or charitable. It's just these bigger fundamental things that can help humanity, and it's not just for the business's sake itself. So I guess you can have longer running things in the background, and that would be cool for the videos too. I mean, it's half a reason why loads of TV shows exist. Like, I don't know if you ever watched The Mentalist. Mm-hmm. But The Mentalist was an individual story every single episode with the overarching villain of Red John. And it's just no matter what, he just existed in the background. He wasn't always commented on, and there were sometimes episodes where they completely missed him out. But there was this thing that kept you watching because you knew there was a bigger story.
That was a great series. I forgot about that. Mm-hmm. Oh, is that on any streaming thing? I feel like I need to binge that again.
Might be on Amazon, but I'm not sure.
All right. Yeah. Let's move on and start trying to wrap this up a little. So you've got a hero. You've got a guide. The guide's giving the hero a plan, and they need to call them forward to action and also identify the stakes. So if you don't do this with me, this is how things are probably going to end up. And if you do things with me, this is how it's going to end up. And so on a very broad sense, you just need to sort of say, if you don't do this, then you're basically going to be where you were before and nothing's really going to be solved. You need to be careful not to dwell on it, of course, and not overdo it. It just needs to be, I think the customer just needs to be reminded of that. If you're doing them a service that is genuinely going to make their life better, then just identify the stakes just a little bit and just make them aware of that. And then when it comes to sort of showing their life at the end, that's where you can go to them skipping through fields and picking flowers and all. But again, probably don't overdo it just to make it seem like you're blowing your own horn. But you just need to be realistic about these things.
I believe the phrase is tooting your own horn.
Tooting your own horn. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, that is essentially it. Storytelling in a nutshell is just making sure that the customer or the viewer is invested throughout the entire process. And if you can get that investment on an emotional level, you're more than likely to gain a sale, gain a new subscriber, gain somebody who's going to be a little bit more passionate about what you do, and hopefully invest in you in the future too.
So, if you have any questions about StoryBrand, or you've liked this episode or whatever, again, there will be a link to that book in the description below if you do want to purchase it. It's only a short read, I'd say, maybe a day or two you'll get through it. It's a short read, really good, and it will be an affiliate link, so we'll get a small cut at no extra cost to you. So if you want to support the podcast, that's a great way of doing it.
So yeah, you've got the description if you're watching it on YouTube, but of course, if you're listening to it, there's the podcast website, where'smythingpodcast.com. You can also go there to find our new finance reports, where we're going to be releasing monthly updates on how we're doing as a business individually. So Matt's got his own, I've got my own. We're being completely transparent financially. You can find out how much Matt earns from YouTube and where all his money goes. It's a worrying amount. And if you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify, just give us a review. Let us know what you think. I know you're thinking 5 stars. I know you're thinking it's the best podcast you've ever heard. But just because I know it doesn't mean everyone else does. So put a cheeky little review in there as well. It always helps us out.
But that's going to be it for this podcast. As always, thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure to have you here as always. And we'll see you next week to find your thing in the bushes that you might have dropped at some point. I did this last week. I said I love ending these episodes poorly.
I didn't expect it in the bushes. Where the hell did that come from?
That's where I lose things often.